Terrific. Thank you so much, CJ. And just for everybody on the
Oh,
I got muted. CJ is one of two big contributors to this entire festival. She and Kirsten have done a massive amount of work to get this thing organized. So kudos to CJ for pulling it together and also hosting several sessions. So thank you. Okay, maybe you could flip up the presentation. So just as a little background, we Transition Guelph have been thinking about cold rooms and root cellaring for quite a few years, going back almost 3 years. And that was way before the pandemic because of climate change and, well, particularly climate change and the long, fragile supply chains that our food system really depends on. And the two things that really worried me about climate change is first, the weather events that could stop trucks rolling for extended periods of time. It doesn't take too long for the shelves to empty out in a supermarket, but also there have been significant crop failures or issues with harvests because of climate change weather events as well. And then there's some really positive aspects of root cellaring that we wanted to connect into the circular food economy, support our local producers, especially the organic growers who are producing wonderful food, and they bear the entire cost of storing food because a lot of people can't store harvests of any size throughout the winter months. And so they're excited. The ones we talk to are excited about this opportunity as well, because a lot of people like to have a whole whack of carrots and beautiful organic potatoes and other things to store in their home. So, okay. Thank you. There we go. All right, so root cellaring by Steve Tedesco in lieu of Ian Findlay. So welcome, and this picture you see, photo is quite iconic, at least for our work. It's very colorful and it kind of gives us a real vibe. So the agenda today, we've done the introductions. I think in the interest of time, we'll just slide past the land acknowledgement. And I've done the backgrounder, so I'm just going to go right into the presentation. And here are our grant partners here that have been fabulous. Oh, and that's me. I was kind of the instigator of this project. I'm also the chair of Transition Guelph and also an ecological farmer here locally, just outside Guelph, by Guelph Lake, and that's me. And I think that's my daughter's shoulder you see there. Okay, so we'll skip that. We talked about this. I will, just to that last point, if you're at all interested in some of the fairly major shifts that are happening in our society these days and how transition movement is really positioned to help people cope and respond, communities respond to these shifts. This Thursday's keynote event will dive deeply into that, so I highly recommend it. And it's too bad Ian isn't on the call, because when we signed up Ian, I was absolutely thrilled to be associated with him. Such a pillar of the community, and it's also a construction guy, which is a perfect match. I was also going to give him a gentle jab and say I was also relieved when his police check came through clean. All right, so what is a root cellar? And as I mentioned, can be also called a cold room. And it's usually an underground structure, could be detached from your house or could be in your house. The deeper in the ground or below grade, the better. Well, you don't have to go too deep, but as long as about 75 or 80% of the walls are below grade, that's pretty ideal. And it's the place you can store vegetables, fruit, and you can see here preserves and other foods as well. Because of the high humidity in cold rooms, root cellars, things in cardboard boxes, you just have to be a little wary. You can attract a bit of mold, so be mindful of that. But they're pretty versatile, and you can put a lot of different things in there. We have a big one at our place, and we put all kinds of things down in there. The benefits of root cellaring, you know, the nutrient density of local organic or ecologically grown food is just phenomenal, and the taste is different. If you get something from one of the local farms and compare, let's say, a carrot to something that you buy in a grocery store, it's just no comparison whatsoever. And so you're supporting people who are really delivering high quality, nutritious food as opposed to fast foods. And ecological farming is also a very important practice for our future for a whole host of reasons, but it's a sustainable growing practice, whereas conventional farming has lots of big challenges. Okay, so the benefits here, the beauty of root cellars is the passive cooling, and we'll talk a bit about how that works in a minute, but it's 100% renewable energy. In fact, you don't have to put up solar panels or anything. It just works with convection. And you know, food miles on some of the produce. I think we were at a local market last weekend, and there's all kinds of beautiful vegetables and fruit on the stand, and they're coming up from Central America. That's a long way. And most of the stuff that you buy in the grocery store has some kind of packaging, and there's lots of waste there. So you can avoid that with local produce. And then regenerative farming, it has also many benefits, including CO2 sequestration, but also builds topsoil, where it's something is precious, a resource that we're losing at an alarming rate globally. Okay. I'm kind of blowing through this. I'll invite people to ask questions if they want, because we've got lots of time, and I'm quite fine with fielding questions as we go here.
Actually, Steve, I'll interrupt there. It has joined. So,
oh, awesome.
Yeah, Ian, welcome. Welcome to the show, my friends. If you want to unmute, and yes, everybody. Do
you want me to keep driving?
Yeah.
Hi, CJ. Thanks, Steve, for pinch hitting for me. Yeah, so I just need to grab the screen here. Host disabled, participant screening sharing.
Got it. And yes, Steve, are you still with us by any chance? Because if you are,
Yep.
maybe while Ian is figuring this out, Sharon had a question. So Sharon, I don't know if you'd like to unmute. Maybe now's a good time you can ask your question. It definitely relates to what you were speaking to.
Hi, Sharon. Are you on mute still?
I think can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Do I sound like Sharon? This is Brian.
It's Brian Starrett here. I just wondered if Ian would mention, or if somebody would mention, where we are in Eden Mills, it has a high water table. I can't make a root cellar here. Are there some possible alternatives?
Hi, Brian. It's good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, we were talking to a neighbor that you're probably familiar with several months ago, and she mentioned that very issue. Yeah, I feel your pain on that. What we were kind of thinking is a low-tech type of a thing. If you had a little bit of an elevated part of your backyard where you might go small scale and bury a galvanized trash can packed around the edges with straw, and put it down maybe a half a meter below the surface. You get the lid on, put more straw on top, and then inside the can you could put damp sand and put your root vegetables kind of layered in it. It's not ideal because you'd have to trudge out in the snow and dig it out and open it up and get your stuff, but that is one possibility you could try.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll touch on some of the root cellar options a little further on, and I'll speak to that one specifically. And yeah, that high water table is a real challenge because it really will contaminate the root cellar. So
right.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Brian. So yeah, benefits of root cellaring, and I think Steve's touched on this a little bit in his presentation, but it supports healthier food options. So local and organic food has a much higher nutritional value due to healthier, more sustainable growing practices. Another benefit is it helps to reduce the effects of climate change and reduces the carbon footprint. And this is done because the cooling of the root cellar is done with 100% renewable energy, because we're using the Earth's natural ability to cool. There's no other mechanical, we don't plug anything in to it. And we're also reducing the amount of food miles from field. So it just helps reduce the food miles from getting from the field to the fork, so to speak. And also reduces a lot of the packaging waste that's created when you're packaging up food in California, produce, and shipping it up here. So you can think of all the carbon footprint for all of that, plus all the packaging and waste. Okay, another benefit is it is much more energy efficient, so no electricity. We talked about that a little bit for the heating and the cooling. It also enables the seasonal bulk purchasing at a much lower cost. So you know, often go to the farmer's market or a farm gate and you'll see big bags of potatoes at a really reasonable cost. The challenge with that is how do you store it? Well, if you've got a root cellar, that it helps you, gives you more capacity to store. And also it could potentially eliminate the need for a second refrigerator or a freezer. It also supports local farmers and producers. So it encourages new people to get into sustainable food farming and production, and it helps to keep the money in the local economy, both Guelph and Wellington. So it helps to support the local farmers and producers. So types of root cellars. So this is a very traditional type of root cellar. Took this picture a couple of months ago when we had lots of winter. This is up at Ignatius Farms, and this is a structure that's built into the ground. It was built in 1949. This is the entrance to it. And you can see that they've bermed it up on two sides and over top of it, and gives it that thermal protection. Next slide shows you a picture of the inside, and I'm doing a little bit of work. Steve and I went out there and did a bit of work on the passive venting. So this is inside. It's essentially a big concrete bunker, so concrete on all 6 sides. And once this gets cooled down, this will stay quite chilly all through the winter, and those buckets that you can see in the background, those are all full of produce, roots, vegetables. So there's beets, potatoes, carrots, part of the Ignatius Farms CSA, and as well as their seed stock for the upcoming year. So this is a very traditional type of root cellar. Next slide. So we're calling this the more modern type of root cellar, or a cold room. This is quite typical. You see lots of these in the city of Guelph, and it's located right underneath the front porch. Many builders of Eastern European and Italian heritage will incorporate this when they're building a new structure. When they're pouring the footings and foundations, they'll just make a little jut out for the front porch, put a concrete cap on it, and we'll create a root cellar. And we'll talk a little bit more about this one in an upcoming slide. So you'll see this is a very typical, in lots of neighborhoods, if you're walking around, you'll see on the front porch, you'll see a couple little vent holes, and that can be used as a root cellar. And then the next slide shows what we were referring to Brian, was the budget root cellar, where you take a vessel, a steel can, or a plastic tub, and you dig a hole, and you fill it around with straw, and you put the vessel in the hole, and a bit of sand or shavings, and then you cover it up with straw and soil. It's low cost, but it is challenging, because as Steve says, you'll have to trudge out and maybe clear some snow out and dig around in there, and pests can be a bit of a problem as well with this type. But it's a low cost way to create that same type of root cellar effect. So what are the three key components to a successful root cellar? Well, the first one is temperature. So it's the Goldilocks range. So you don't want it too hot to spoil the food, but you don't want it so cold that it freezes the food. Another key component is humidity. So you want really high humidity to keep the produce from drying out. And ventilation, that's really key, is to keep the air circulating in the root cellar. So the next slide talks about the temperature. So the ideal range that you want to keep your root cellar at is between 2 and 5 degrees Celsius. So that's about the same temperature as your refrigerator. That's the ideal range that you're looking for in your root cellar. Humidity. So you want it almost Cool Hand Luke humid. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman, very hot and sweaty movie. Well, that's what you want. It's not so much the heat, but you want that high humidity in your root cellar. So you're looking at anywhere from 80 to 95% relative humidity. Within the root cellar, the humidity usually settles to the bottom, to the floor of the root cellar. So that's where you'll keep the vegetables and root vegetables that you want to make sure have that are tolerant to the high humidity, such as potatoes and carrots. Other vegetables that are being stored, like onions and carrots, like it a little less humid. So you would store those closer to the ceiling. So if you had a shelf, the top shelf, you put your onions and garlic on the top. On the bottom, on the floor, you'd be storing your potatoes and your carrots and your beets and those type of vegetables that look for high humidity. And then finally, ventilation. And so this is a picture of that same root cellar that we were showing you before. And you can see I've pointed out here the two vents. The cold air supply vent, although we're not showing it here in the picture, on the inside, what we have done is piped that down to the floor of the root cellar on the inside. So the cold air enters that and drops right down to the floor. That's exactly where you want it. But then as that air on the inside warms up, it will then exhaust itself out the other vent, which is usually at the far end, away from the cold air supply. And you'll get this natural circulation of the cold air coming in, dropping to the floor. As it warms up, it'll then discharge itself out through the exhaust, and you get this natural cycling through. And that really is key to it, because you don't want any mold or stale, stagnant air is not good for your root cellar. You want to keep the air turning over all the time. And my note there talks about apples, or something that if you're storing them in your root cellar, they naturally release this gas, ethylene gas, that can cause other fruits and vegetables to prematurely spoil. So if you've got it properly vented, that helps to keep all your vegetables safe and secure for the season. So what does Transition Guelph and Woodside Root Cellars do? Is, well, we'll come out and we'll provide a free home assessment and consultation. So generally what we're looking at is that under porch model. As I said, it's very common in the city of Guelph, but often when you're purchasing your home, you're not really given an owner's manual on how to manage that root cellar, and sometimes it needs a little bit of upgrading just to get it working efficiently. Sometimes people will have stuffed the vents, plugged them up. Maybe there isn't a good door on the root cellar. So we'll go in and we'll look at the ventilation, how well it's being ventilation, how well it's being insulated. We'll look at moisture control, and then we'll provide you with an owner's manual. We call it the Root Cellar Journey Guide. And then we'll also provide a thermometer and a hygrometer as well, so that you can understand and manage the temperature and the humidity.
Amazing. Just to interrupt you there, Ian, Cheryl has a question.
Great.
Amazing. So Cheryl would like to know if apples should be placed closer to the exhaust vent.
I think that would be helpful, although you do want them closer to the floor in a higher humidity. So, but if you can orient them closer to the exhaust, I think that would be helpful as getting that gas closer to the exhaust. Yeah, I would. Would you agree to that, Steve? Is that generally what you would think, that we keep them close to the exhaust so that the ethylene gas can seep out?
Yeah, I agree. And on the floor, but maybe right under that that external vent would be good. Anything I've read about storing apples too, having them in a crate with some slats so that that gas can escape out the sides of the crate is helpful. And I think apples are probably one of the worst offenders for going bad. So probably once a month you're going through your apples to get rid of any ones that are looking suspect and using them right away.
I think that's where the saying "one bad apple" came from, isn't it? Like one bad apple can actually end up destroying your whole apple crop in there. So you do want to keep sorting it, and if one does start to turn, you'll want to pull it out because they'll quickly all want to turn. So thanks for the question. So when we're looking at a root cellar, we'll look at the door, and that's really important because that's the gateway between the heated basement portion of your home and the root cellar, which we're trying to control the temperature and keep it closer to a refrigerator. So often the door might be kind of poorly hung, maybe some gaps around the door, it's not insulated. There's lots of gaps and leaks, and that's going to cause you problems both for your heated space in your basement, but also for the cold cellar. So, and we recommend an insulated steel door as your best option. You can certainly get them used, but often they're a custom size, and it might be difficult to find one that fits specific to the opening that you've got. We'll look at the venting, and often we need to extend the venting on the interior and the exterior to ensure that you're getting the proper circulation and flow. We like to put in, cover all the surfaces inside with mold resistant paint, just to ensure that we're not helping to promote the growth of mold or mildew. And then we'll look at the insulation. Generally, any of the area of your root cellar or your cold room that's above grade, we'd want to look at adding some insulation to the interior side that above grade portion, either the exterior walls or the underside of the deck or the landing of your front porch. We'd want to look at insulating that. This is another option that we've been working on. This is for a higher volume farmer, perhaps someone who's got a CSA or a farm gate and they're bringing in lots of produce. So this is kind of like the traditional style of root cellar, like I showed you the picture from Ignatius Farm. This is a precast concrete shed, so it's got concrete on all 6 sides, 4 walls, top and bottom, with a steel door, and it's got some venting. And the idea is that you would just take this whole precast shed and bury it into a hillside. So if you've got a bit of an elevation, we might excavate around, dig this into the hillside, and then earth berm up around it on 3 sides with just the wall with the door on it facing the exterior. And then we'd extend the venting pipe up above grade. But this is for a bigger volume. Like these things are, 100 square feet inside, much bigger than what a family would be using. But this is a really a good way of creating that concrete bunker. Because it's less than 100, or it is 100 square feet, you don't require a building permit for this. So it's sort of a real easy way to create a whole lot of capacity to store food for, as I said, for the larger producers.
Ian, if I could just jump in for a sec, going back to Brian Scarrett's question, Brian, theoretically, you could drop one of these on your property just sitting on the ground, but you'd have to truck in an awful lot of dirt basically to berm it up, which I wouldn't recommend. And these things are fairly pricey. Ian, just this unit alone, without any of the landscaping, what did you find out that was costing?
It's about $10,000 delivered, and then you'd have your excavating costs and a bit of piping and fine tuning. So you're probably depending on your site and location, all that, you're the $12,000–$15,000 for something like this. So this is the root cellar journey guide that Transition Guelph has put together to help you manage your root cellar. All sorts of tips and tricks on where to store your fruits and vegetables, different locations within the root cellar, and as well the thermometer, hygrometer is to help you keep the temperature range and humidity range that's ideal for long-term storage of fruits and vegetables. And if you're looking for additional resources, certainly the book on the left, Steve Maxwell, who lives on Manitoulin Island, somewhat local. This is a really comprehensive book on root cellaring, showing you all the different, so it goes to the different root cellars that I've shown you here this evening, but it also touches on a few other ones, and there's a whole, I think a third of the book on different recipes for different root vegetables and preserves and that kind of thing. And the other book, Root Cellaring, Natural Cold Storage of Fruits and Vegetables. Both these books are available at your favorite downtown Guelph bookstore, the bookshelf. You might have to order them in, but really both really solid resources. So enough from me and Steve for the moment. Are there any questions or comments or stories that you can share, either from your root cellar or from a friend or growing up as a family? Anything that you can share or questions you might have about root cellaring?
it seems like Anita has a question. Anita, if you want to unmute, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. This is more a curiosity, and I'm vegetarian, so this doesn't really apply to me, but both my grandparents are immigrants from Italy, and they have sort of multiple cold cellars, or what they call cantinas, in their houses.
Wow.
And my one grandfather has kind of like a separate one under his garage where he tends to do all of his like salami curing and stuff. And I was wondering if there's sort of different parameters for curing meats as opposed to storing vegetables for the space.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the same principles hold whether you're storing meat or vegetables. You're wanting to control the temperature, the humidity, and you're wanting ventilation.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't have a lot of experience with that. Maybe Steve knows a little bit more. I know the Steve Maxwell book, I think he does touch on that a little bit, but most of our focus has been on fruits and vegetables.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's my focus too, but I should just ask him as well.
Yeah.
Anita, I'm kind of in the same boat as Ian. We focus mostly on the fruit and vegetables, but the curing process for various meats and fishes, I think there's quite a range of ways of doing it. There's smoking, there's curing with the salt and spices and whatnot. And I suspect each one has its unique requirements. So I would definitely go to someone who is expert in that. And I suspect the two rooms are separate for a good reason.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks for your insight. And this has been really great overall. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita.
Amazing. And I think Lila is next for a question. Lila, if you'd like to unmute now.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the like the makeshift buried trash can one. That sounds like a kind of a fun project to do. And I was just wondering, does the straw around it keep it insulated enough? It seems like it would freeze really easily in the winter.
Yeah, so you will want to put the straw around. It will help to insulate it. I mean, what you're looking for, that sort of Goldilocks temperature, and it's a combination of the depth in the ground. So you want to capture the cold from the air, but the earth also has some warmth to it. So you're trying to find that happy spot in the earth that where you're not going to get freezing. It is a low-tech solution. I'd be fooling you if I were to tell you that you wouldn't have a problem if it got down to minus 25 degrees outside. You'd be pretty hard pressed to be able to keep it from freezing in those kind of conditions. If it's packed in the straw, it would be loose enough that if you were anticipating extreme weather events like that you could pull it up and maybe relocate it to somewhere else that wasn't going to be have such an extreme range of temperatures until such time as you could put it back outside where it was safe. So it is a budget solution, but it's going to require a little bit more effort just to manage it, because yeah, if you're getting into those minus 20 degree temperatures, yeah, it's probably going to freeze. I mean, even a cellar that's underneath a front porch, getting into those extreme weather event temperatures, you do have to be careful that too much cold air is coming in. So you'd be wanting to continually monitor it, and you may have to block off that cold air vent coming in. So in our the root cellars that we provide, we have a way you can reduce the amount of volume of cold air that's coming in. So there's sort of 3 settings. You got your full setting, sort of a half setting, and then blocking it off completely. Because on those really cold days, even something underneath your porch, there is a risk that it could freeze.
And if I could add on, I kind of think of the outdoor can idea is just like in nature. You know, you leave potatoes out over the winter in the field by mistake, and then the next spring there they are sprouting up. So they actually, a lot of these vegetables are quite used to being in the ground during the winter time, and you're essentially replicating that. Some might get a little frostbitten, but you wouldn't want to store apples underground like that at the top because they probably would spoil. But potatoes and carrots and beets and things like that are pretty hardy.
Yeah, true. You can be kind of choosy with the ones you put in.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lila.
Amazing. Nadia, if you want to unmute yourself, you are free to ask your question now. Actually, now that I'm looking, oh, there you are. Hey, Nadia, you'd like to unmute?
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yep, we can hear you, Nadia.
Hi, well, thanks for the presentation. So we have an under the porch root cellar, and it gets hot in the summer and it freezes in winter. So I was just wondering if there's any particular thing that we should look at first.
Yeah, so we'd want to look at the ventilation. In the summertime, it is probably going to get hot regardless. I mean, the root cellars are ideally used sort of from October to March-ish. In the summer, they are going to get warm. In the winter time, the problem with the freezing, we'd want to look at insulation above grade. So any portion of that front porch that you have that's above grade, like the height of the ground, maybe a foot or two, we'd want to look at insulating the inside walls of the porch that are above the top of the soil, as well as the underside of the deck, like the ceiling inside the root cellar. So that'll help to prevent the cold from really getting in, and the ventilation. So those would be the 2 challenges that your root cellar is having right now. I would think is getting the ventilation and the temperature control.
Yeah, thank you.
So are you? So you haven't been able to use it because everything ends up freezing in the winter time, and have you've just blocked off? You've put an old towel or something in those. Do you have vent holes in your root cellar?
Yeah, we have vent holes, but no tubing.
Oh, tubing. Okay. So we would look at extending one of if you've got 2 holes, likely we would look at extending one of them, turning that into the intake, and extending that from the hole down to the floor, and then putting some ways to control the amount of cold air that's coming in, because maybe you've got too much cold air coming in too. So, you know, if you want to get in touch with us after the presentation, we'd be happy to set up a time to come out and take a look at it and give you sort of a free assessment of what kind of upgrades your root cellar would need to make it much more productive and less frustrating for you.
That is perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nadia.
Ian, I feel like a color commentary. I'm just to add to your comments. Our personal experience with our root cellar in the summertime, it absolutely gets a little warmer in there. Right now, I think through the winter we were around +4 Celsius, which is ideal. But in the summer, it would probably be running around 12 to 15 Celsius, which is still pretty cool and not bad for storing things like wine and beer and things like that. So, but the insulation is bang on. It helps to prevent it warming up too much in the summer as well.
Thank you very much. Our next question is from Jonathan. If you would like to unmute Jonathan.
Hello. Hey, Ian.
Hey, Jonathan. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, this has been very informative and enjoyable.
Good. Good.
Well, my question's sort of been touched on. It was about temperature control. So I think you've kind of answered that in that you play with the pipe a little bit and you adjust your insulation values. Maybe just like what kind of products do you like to use for your insulation, and do you do anything to restrict moisture at all, like any tieback along the walls or anything like that?
So no to the tieback. We would look at, depending on the root cellar and what kind of protection it had, we'd make an assessment on whether a mold resistant paint should go on the walls and the ceiling. If it looks really good and dry, we wouldn't have to do it. But if it looks like you might have had some challenges in the past with mold and mildew, we might look at coating everything with a mold resistant paint. And then we would look at using rigid foam insulation and spray foam, cans of spray foam to fill in the cracks. And we're only looking at insulating the portion that's above grade, including the inside of the ceiling. And we're generally adding, about 2 inches. So each inch is R7. So you're adding about R14 to the inside walls and ceiling of the root cellar. Any of the batt insulations like fiberglass or the mineral wools like Roxol, unfortunately, they're not really suitable as a form of insulation in a root cellar. The moisture, the high humidity and the moisture break down the binding agents in those materials. So they're not suitable insulations. And we would use, generally we'd use an XPS foam insulation, which is extruded polystyrene, which is suitable for underground use. The other one is more like the little balls, they call that EPS. That's more for above grade, but we would want to use a below grade quality rigid board, 2-inch, and you can get it at Rona or Home Depot or any of the major building supply companies. It comes in like 2-foot by 4-foot sections. You could even use that to insulate the inside of a wood door if you wanted to try and improve the insulation value of the door, but didn't want to spend the money on a new insulated steel door. You could use that kind of foam insulation on that as well. So I hope that answers your question, Jonathan.
Yeah, for sure. I was just wondering about some of the products you use. Would an example of the XPS be the Pink Panther? I think it's Owens Cornering foam. Yep. Sometimes gets used on the exteriors.
Yep.
Foams.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Any of the it's a standard that's below grade XPS. So yeah, that's a absolutely suitable product to be using. And as I said, you only need to insulate the area that's above grade or maybe 6 inches below the grade and up. So if your porch is sitting like 2 feet up, that's 24 inches. So I'd maybe insulate it 30 inches down from the ceiling. You don't need to insulate the floor. You don't need to insulate anything that's below ground. That the earth is doing that for you for free.
Right. Okay. So I guess the temperature coming from the walls in those locations, are you trying to match that of the earth, sort of thing? So you want to maintain like your 2 to 5 degrees Celsius. So I guess the temperature coming in through the ceiling above and those walls above grade, hopefully you're kind of equaling what it's doing down below too.
Exactly. I mean, ideally the whole root cellar would be below the grade, below the earth, buried, ideally. But because that's not the reality. The front porch is sticking out a little bit, a couple of feet, so you have 2 steps up into your front door. You just add a bit of the insulation on the inside to make that happen. Yep.
Great, thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
Awesome. And I know we've hit 8 o'clock, but maybe a couple more quick questions if you have time for it, or did you want to perhaps we'll have to contact you going forward?
Well, I've only been on the meeting for half an hour, so I'm willing to see. No, I appreciate if others want to leave the meeting. I'm happy to stay and answer more questions.
Well then, perfect. We're going to take it to Michelle. I hope I'm not ruining the pronunciation, but if you would like to unmute, it's all you.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Ian, how are you?
I'm great, thanks.
I have a question about tricks to, if you need to get your humidity levels up, or is that usually an issue?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Humidity levels, how do you get them up without using electricity? What are some tricks?
Taking a spray bottle and going in and spraying the floor, or some of the side walls with like the concrete side walls. That's just a really simple, low cost way of doing that. Or a pan of water, just setting it down on the floor. That will help increase the humidity levels. I certainly wouldn't recommend putting a humidifier in there. That is overkill, and that sort of defeats the whole intention of the root cellar. So just a spray mist bottle, and then check back the next day and see how your humidity level is doing.
Excellent, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So Sharon, if you would like to unmute and ask your question.
Yours?
Okay, well, it's Brian. Brian has a question again.
Oh, one of my questions, it's Brian again. I was wondering about, I've heard about people storing their cannabis in root cellars, but that may be because they were hiding it. Do you know if there's any benefits for now that they don't need to hide it? Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did hear that, and I'm carefully thinking through my answer here. I think so. I'm not an expert in cannabis. I think that the humidity levels might be a little too high. I'm thinking like a humidor. I'm thinking Cuban cigars. You do want it humid, but I'm not sure if it's 80 to 90% humidity. But I'm not, I'm not an expert in the smoking stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, and I did, it's Sharon, I did have a question as well. If we can't have our own root cellar, are there farmers or, local CSAs who would be using a root cellar that we could buy from during the winter?
Well, that is actually part of what Transition Guelph and Woodside Root Cellars are trying to start. Mm-hmm. So part of our initiative in this project, and not only is getting the private homeowners and such as yourself to have root cellars, but we wanted to try and build 4 or 5 community root cellars. So we have a project in the Two Rivers neighborhood in Guelph to build a community root cellar.
Okay.
And we were supposed to start that before Christmas, but unfortunately that got put on hold because of the pandemic and lockdown. So we're hoping to get that underway very soon. We're in talks with, I think it's fair to say 10 Carden Street, trying to get a root cellar in the basement there on Carden Street. And we're looking at, what's the other one we're working on, Steve? Everton. We're looking at, we've had a meeting with those guys as well, and they're looking at putting a root cellar in there as well. So we'd like to get some community root cellars going. We've been talking to the Neighborhood Support Coalition, and they're very much interested. So I think we're going to get a lot of wind in our sails this summer. Unfortunately, a lot of our conversations kind of got stopped over the last couple of months because of the pandemic. So I see, Steve, you've joining us here. Do you want to add some more to that conversation?
Yeah, that was a great answer, Ian. Sharon, we do know for a fact that Ignatius Farm CSA, they just, well, the farm itself has that big root cellar. I've
Right.
personally bought some of their produce in the wintertime, so they've got lots. But if you're familiar with Taste Real in Wellington County, they've got a great
Oh, yeah.
website, and you could
yeah.
probably ping very easily some of the organic farms around
Yeah.
your, and see if they have root cellars.
Sharon and I live in Eden Mills, and we might just talk to the people around here and see if there might be some interest in having something like that in Eden Mills. The trouble is, we also have that bedrock that's pretty close to the surface, so we'd have to find a hillside, I think, to tuck into.
Yeah, so if you guys get interest, connect with us, because we'd be very interested in helping you with that.
Great, thanks.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Great.
Amazing. That was phenomenal. Thank you so much, Ian and Steve, for just generously sharing that knowledge and like your passion and the time with the community. We're really grateful to have folks like you helping to strengthen our local resilience. And also thank you everybody here. It seems like most people checked through with us today, and it was definitely a grand display of patience and support. So thank you everybody. And Ian, I just wanted to throw it back. If people have more questions or want to get in contact with you, how can they go about doing that?
Sure. So our we've been using info at Transition Guelph. Is it .ca?
.org.
.org. Thank you. Yeah. Info at transitionguelph.org as for any interest. I know there was someone earlier wanted us to come and do an assessment. That would be a good way to get in contact with, and that goes to both Steve at Transition Guelph and myself at Woodside Root Cellars. So we'd be happy to set up a follow-up either phone call, or if we can get an all clear from public health, come out and do an actual in-person assessment and get going on that. So yeah, love to hear more from everyone. So thank you very much, CJ, for your help making all of this happen, and Steve and at Transition Guelph, and also another shout out to Innovation Guelph and Seeding Our Food Future for helping making this whole project happen. So yes, thanks, and thanks to everyone tonight for your good questions and your interest in root cellaring. So thank you.
Thank you again. Okay, so it's the session. Thanks,
Okay.
Glenn. Have a great evening.
Okay, take care. Good night. Thank you.